Okay, so I've spent like over $61,000 on Facebook ads and Instagram ads. I've generated more than 13,000 leads by now and ran that like same engine for a couple of years. And the single biggest thing that I've learned in all that time is that most life insurance agents open every sales message the same way. And that one decision kills the whole marketing campaign before anyone even gets to the pitch. So today, I want to walk you through the 6 ways you're supposed to open a sales message, any sales message. So your Facebook ad, your voicemail, your DM, the first 10 seconds on a discovery call, and it's 6 formulas, and you're probably using just one or two without knowing it, but you're probably picking the wrong one for the situation you're in. And I got this framework from a great book called Great Lead by Michael Masterson and John Ford. 2 guys who studied every winning direct response sales letter of like the last 60 years. And what they did was they reversed engineered them into just 6 patterns. So when you understand these 6 patterns, you stop guessing at your openers and you start picking one pattern on purpose. So here's what we're gonna do. I'll walk you through the 6, then I'll show you where each one belongs, and then we'll go over the 4 kind of like leak points in your business where you're using the wrong one right now, and how to fix all 4 in just 30 minutes, okay? So the 6 lead types are offer, promise, problem solution, big secret, proclamation, and story. That's the whole list. Every opening you've ever read that made you keep reading falls into one of those 6 buckets. And every opening you've ever kind of like scrolled past didn't fit the audience that it was written for. So let me walk through them one by one so that this makes sense for simplicity purposes. And I'll show you what each one sounds like in the life insurance world. Number 1 is the offer lead. And this is the most direct opening there is. You lead with the deal itself. So price, guarantee, terms, bonus, something like guaranteed to improve your child's grades at school or you don't pay anything. In our world, our offer lead is when you open with, I'll build your family a 1-page life insurance plan comparing 3 different carriers in 24 hours, and if you don't like it, you owe me nothing. That's an offer lead. And it works when the prospect already knows you and already trusts you and just needs to kind of like see the deal. So for referrals, for past clients, for your existing warm list, or for repeat buyers, that's when the offer lead is kind of like your best friend. But if you open a cold Facebook ad with a straight offer, most people don't know you or trust you or even just like care about your deal just yet. It's kind of like wrong tool at the wrong door. That's the best way to think about it. So number 2 is the promise lead. And it's a little bit less direct. You lead with the biggest, best, most emotionally loaded claim that you can make with your product. Think like, for example, I don't know if you've read this book, but there's a book that's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I actually have it like right behind me. Great book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. In life insurance, the promise is the headline. For example, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's the book, that's the promise, and the promise is the headline. In life insurance, a promise lead sounds like something like, make sure your kids stay in the same school district if something happens to you in the next 90 days. Notice how you don't mention the product yet. You just make the promise. And promise leads, like, they work when the prospect has heard of what you sell, but isn't sure if it's for them, if it's the right product for them. They're kind of like comparing things. So somebody who has been on your list for a while, who has been a lead for a while, or somebody who has already been quoted by 3 different agents, that person needs the promise, right? Like, not the deal, they need the promise. Now, the thing about promises today is that everybody is making them. Everybody makes promises. Everybody makes these guarantees. So the prospect has been hit with so many that they've started like tuning them out. They like disregard them. They disregard the promises, which means that your promise has to be more specific. Your promise has to be more emotional, kind of like more unusual than the next guys or the next ladies, the next insurance agent's promise. Protect your family, build generational wealth, all of these things that you've heard before, doesn't cut it. Everybody says that. But make sure your wife doesn't have to call her brother for money if you're not around in 12 months. That makes sense. That lands with the client. So the more specific, the harder it is to ignore. So number 3 is a problem solution lead. And this is the classic kind of like hot button kind of opener. You don't mention the product yet and you don't mention the deal yet. You lead with the prospect's biggest, most emotional, most relevant problem, right? Kind of like you've got 2 kids, a mortgage, and a business that owes you more than you owe the business. If you're gone in 6 months, who signs the checks? Does that make sense? That is a problem solution lead. It works on somebody who is problem aware. They know that they have a problem, but hasn't matched a solution to it yet. They haven't matched a solution to the problem, which is honestly a huge chunk of the market. Like parents in their 30s and 40s who kind of know they need something, but don't know what and don't know from who. That's the biggest chunk of the market. They know that they need something, they just haven't matched it to life insurance. They know like, oh my God, if something happens to me, like what would happen to my family? But they haven't matched it to life insurance. Problem solution is probably like the workhorse for cold ads in life insurance because most of the audience is problem aware. They feel like the weight, they just haven't been shown what to do with that weight. They haven't been shown what to do with the stress. So you name the problem out loud, being specific, and then you introduce yourself as somebody who can walk them through the solution. So number 4 is the big secret lead, and this one is completely different because you lead with a piece of hidden knowledge, some system or formula or strategy that the prospect doesn't know about yet. And the whole sort of like engine of the big secret lead is curiosity, right? You tease something that they've never heard of, and to find out what it is, they have to keep reading and eventually pay you to see the reveal. Now, when I say pay you, they don't have to pay you like, I mean, I'm paying for the policy, but they could pay you with their first name, last name, email, and phone number. And so in our world, a big secret lead sounds like there's a way to structure a life insurance policy in Florida that lets you access the money while you're still alive if you get diagnosed with cancer, a heart attack, or a stroke. And if you already own a policy, there's a good chance that yours doesn't have it, so let's review it. Now, the prospect wants to know what that structure is. They want like the big secret. Now, make sure that you're not lying. Make sure that you're advertising. Like you don't want to mislead people with your advertising. You want to be as honest as possible. Very important to not just make things up when you're making these sort of like formulas, like this strategy, because they want the secret. They want to know like what happens afterwards. And big secret leads, they work great when your prospect is skeptical and already kind of like, you remember how earlier we were talking about the people that tune out normal promises? These work when people have already tuned out normal promises. You give them something that sounds like it's behind the curtain. And the thing you have to remember about big secret leads is specificity. So being specific. Because a secret without proof sounds like a scam. So if you're gonna open with, there's a way to do X that most parents don't know, you better be able to back it up in the next 30 seconds. Does that make sense? Show the specific mechanism, name the specific writer, for example, name the specific carrier, otherwise the prospect thinks you're a liar. Number 5 is a proclamation lead. You lead with something so bold or so unexpected that the prospect stops scrolling. So for example, and make sure, I'm just giving examples like off the top of my head, so you have to be like, do research, make sure you're actually advertising something real. For example, by 2029, over 40% of life insurance sold in the US will happen without an agent ever setting foot in the client's house. That's a proclamation lead. It jars the reader, and it works on people who are completely unaware of the problem, unaware of the product, unaware of you, people who are not looking for insurance today, but a big enough proclamation gets them to stop. And proclamation leads are indirect and take longer to get to the pitch, so they're risky, because if the reader isn't hooked by the proclamation, then they leave. But if they are hooked, you now have their full attention and you can do a lot with it. This is what most kind of like, YouTube thumbnails are doing. By the way, if you didn't know, how when you open up YouTube and there's like this big thumbnail that catches your attention, that's kind of like a proclamation lead. They're leading with proclamation. Hopefully, my thumbnail that got you into this video was a proclamation thumbnail. Number 6 is the story lead. And story leads are like the most indirect and often the most powerful. Because you open with a person, something happens to them, and the reader gets emotionally involved, like emotionally attached to a person they don't know. They're just reading their story before they realize that they're reading an ad. And the most famous ad like ever written is a story lead. And you can Google this, like it's like all over the internet. The ad is called "They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play ... That single sentence sold pianos and courses for 50 years. So in life insurance, a story lead sounds like, last year, 41-year-old dad in Miami paid $87 a month for a policy. His wife thought it was too much. 8 months later, he had a stroke on Tuesday morning at his desk. This is what happened next. Now, the reader has to keep reading because they're inside the story. And story leads work on almost every audience level except the most aware, like the most aware that they need life insurance, because everybody loves a story. That's just human psychology, and human psychology hasn't changed. Humans communicate the same way since the beginning of time through storytelling. The one hard rule with story leads in our industry is the story has to be real, not made up, not composite, like real. Because everything we do is regulated and everything gets audited, and one fake story wipes out 3 years of trust. Okay, so those are the 6: offer, promise, problem, solution, big secret, proclamation, story. And the reason you need to know all 6 is because you have 4 leak points in your business where you're picking the wrong one right now. Maybe 5, maybe 6 leaks. Leak 1 is your Facebook ad opener. Most agents open with a promise lead and their audience is cold, problem aware, which means promise is a wrong tool at the door. Rewrite it as a problem solution or a story, for example. Leak 2 is your voicemail. Most agents open an offer lead like, hey, it's Mike from ABC Insurance. I wanted to see if you're interested in a quote. The prospect doesn't know you. The prospect doesn't trust you and doesn't care about your deal yet. So it's the wrong opener. That voicemail should be a problem solution, sort of like lead, or a short story lead. 3 is your cold DM. Most agents open with a promise or an offer. Both are wrong for cold. The prospect on Instagram or Facebook has never heard of you, right? Which means you need story, problem solution, or proclamation. Something that stops them from scrolling before they realize that they're being sold to. Week 4 is your first 10 seconds on a discovery call because most agents open with a promise. Hey, thanks for jumping on. I'm going to show you the best plan for your family. That's wrong. The prospect just gave you 12 minutes of their day, 30 minutes of their day, an hour of their day. They're already problem aware. They're already product aware to some degree, and they need to see either the offer lead reframed as here's the exact deal we're going to walk through, or the big secret lead reframed as there's one number on a policy that decides whether the claim pays in 30 days or 14 months. And we're going to find yours today. And look, most agents think they have a script problem, a show up rate problem, or a carrier problem. In some cases, that's true. The fact of the matter is when I run into an agent whose Instagram, Facebook ads, meta ads, they're not working, whose voicemails don't get callbacks, and whose DMs don't get replies, 9 times out of 10, what they actually have is an opening formula problem. They picked the wrong one out of the 6 for the audience sitting on the other side. So pick the right one, and the rest of the sales message almost writes itself. So that is the whole play for this week. I'm rooting for you. Let's get to work.